On a chilly autumn evening in Chicago, rain fell in delicate threads beneath the streetlights, creating a shimmering curtain against the darkened streets. A young man named Ethan navigated the narrow alleys, clutching a small package in his hand. The sound of his shoes splashing against the wet pavement echoed softly, while the beam of his motorcycle headlight cut through the darkness, illuminating his path. At just 20 years old, Ethan already bore the weight of life on his shoulders. That evening, he was tasked with delivering an order to an old apartment building located on the outskirts of the city. As he approached the door, he noticed the warm glow of light spilling through the curtains of a window above. Inside, there was a sense of comfort that contrasted sharply with the cold and loneliness outside. He knocked gently, and the door creaked open to reveal an elderly woman. Her hair was a brilliant white, yet her eyes sparkled with the vibrancy of youth. "Welcome, dear," she said in a soft voice, her tone warm and inviting. "I appreciate you coming out in this rain." Ethan offered a slight smile. "It's no trouble at all, ma'am. It's just part of the job." The woman, whose name was Margaret, was 75 years old. In her gaze, there was no hint of the distance typically reserved for a mere customer. Instead, her eyes reflected the joy of someone who had long awaited the company of another. Perhaps the arrival of this young man at her door was more than just a simple delivery. It felt like a moment that transcended the ordinary. As Ethan handed her the package, their hands brushed lightly against each other. His cold, damp fingers met her warm, dry ones, and that brief contact sparked an unexplainable connection between them. "You must be freezing. Why don't you come inside and warm up a bit?" Margaret suggested, a hint of urgency in her voice. Normally, she wouldn't extend such an invitation, but something in her heart urged her to do so that evening. Ethan hesitated for a moment, feeling the rain trickle down his back, but then he nodded. "If you don't mind, I'd appreciate that." Once inside, the steam from a pot of hot tea filled the kitchen, wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. The old wooden furniture, the faded photographs on the walls, and the small stove crackling in the corner all combined to create an atmosphere of tranquility that spoke of years gone by. Margaret handed him a steaming cup. "Youth has long passed for me," she said with a gentle smile. "But sometimes, one feels the need to share their heart with a stranger." As Ethan looked into her eyes, he saw a profound loneliness, not one steeped in sadness, but rather a deep, meaningful solitude. In that moment, he realized she was not just a customer, she was a story waiting to be told. For Margaret, after so many years, she felt a flicker of youth in the presence of this young man. Time seemed to dissolve as they spoke, the conversation flowing effortlessly from one topic to another. They shared tales of the past, losses endured, and dreams that lingered like ghosts. Hours slipped by unnoticed, and when Ethan finally rose to leave, the rain continued to patter against the windows. Margaret glanced outside and said, "I can't bear the thought of you leaving in this rain. Stay a little longer, let's talk some more." And so, at that moment, their stories truly began to intertwine. The night deepened, and the rain became a gentle melody against the window panes. Inside, the crackling of the stove and the occasional bubbling of the tea created a soothing soundtrack to their unfolding connection. As Ethan sat across from Margaret, he understood that this was no ordinary visit. In her weary yet hopeful gaze, he saw a narrative rich with life experiences. "Dear, back in my day," she began, her voice trailing off as memories danced in her mind, ready to be shared. The cafe on the corner of Maple Street was a cozy little spot, its walls lined with bookshelves filled with well-loved novels and the soft glow of vintage lamps casting a warm light over the wooden tables. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of baked goods, creating an inviting atmosphere that felt like a refuge from the bustling city outside. Margaret, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled back into a loose bun, stood behind the counter, pouring steaming cups for the few patrons scattered throughout the cafe. She wore a soft, oversized sweater in a deep burgundy that draped comfortably over her frame, paired with dark jeans and well-worn sneakers. Her eyes sparkled with a youthful spirit, despite the lines that told stories of laughter and sorrow. As she set a cup down in front of Ethan, a young man in his late 20s with tousled brown hair and a casual plaid shirt, she smiled gently. "You know, youth has long passed for me," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "But sometimes, one feels the need to share their heart with a stranger." Ethan looked into her eyes and saw a profound loneliness, not one steeped in sadness, but rather a deep, meaningful solitude. He sensed that she was not just a barista, she was a story waiting to be told. "I understand," he replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "I've felt that way too." Margaret nodded, her gaze drifting to the window where raindrops danced against the glass. "It's funny how life takes us on unexpected journeys. I've lost so much over the years, children, grandchildren, some are far away, and others have passed on." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I lost my mother when I was young," he confessed, his voice steady. "My father is still alive, but he lives in another city. I came here alone to study and work." Their shared experiences began to dissolve the invisible wall between them, and soon they were two lonely souls meeting in the same quiet space. Margaret took a sip of her tea, then leaned forward slightly, her fingers brushing against Ethan's hand. "Life can harden a person, but sometimes, unexpectedly, someone comes along and touches your heart," she said softly. Ethan's heart fluttered at her touch, a reminder of the warmth of his mother's embrace from years ago. But this feeling was different, more complex, layered with an unspoken connection. "I should probably get going," he said, his voice tinged with reluctance. "I have an early morning tomorrow." Margaret paused, her eyes searching his. "Don't go just yet. Stay here with me tonight. I can prepare a place for you. I don't want you to be alone in this rain." Her invitation struck a chord deep within him. He thought about it, realizing her intentions were genuine. She simply sought companionship, a human connection. "Okay, but just for tonight," he agreed, a small smile breaking through his initial hesitation. As Margaret prepared a small guest room, Ethan wandered around the cafe, taking in the old books lining the shelves and the framed photographs that adorned the walls. One picture caught his eye, a young woman smiling brightly, her arm linked with a man. "Is this you?" he asked as Margaret returned to the room. "That was my youth, with my husband," she replied, a nostalgic smile gracing her lips. "I was beautiful then." "You're still beautiful," Ethan said before he realized the words had slipped out. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions. Margaret's cheeks flushed slightly, but she held his gaze. "Thank you. It's been a long time since someone said that to me." Later that night, as Ethan lay in the guest room, sleep eluded him. A sense of peace washed over him, but there was also an indescribable flutter in his chest. Something was changing. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Margaret entered, holding a warm blanket. "I brought you this, in case you get cold," she said, her voice gentle. "Thank you," he replied, taking the blanket from her. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said, curious. "Do I still look like a woman to you?" The question caught him off guard. He swallowed hard, meeting her gaze. "Yes," he said firmly. "You're a very graceful woman." Margaret stepped closer, her expression contemplative. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and feel like I've forgotten who I am. But your eyes remind me." In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Ethan rose to his feet, the air between them charged with an electric tension. Margaret gently placed her hand on his cheek, her touch soft and reassuring. Inside, I still feel like a mother, but tonight, I just want to be a woman. With those words, the barrier between them crumbled completely. It wasn't a moment driven by desire, it was the embrace of two lonely souls seeking solace in each other. Margaret leaned against Ethan's shoulder, her eyes fluttering shut. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they listened to the rhythm of each other's breaths. The night stretched on, filled with an unspoken understanding, as they cherished the quiet moments together, allowing the world outside to fade away. As dawn broke over the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood, Ethan awoke to the gentle aroma of breakfast wafting through the air. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and listened to the soft sounds of Margaret bustling around in the kitchen. "You're awake," she called out, her voice bright and warm as she entered the room, a steaming cup of tea in one hand and a plate of freshly baked pastries in the other. "I made you some scones." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of comfort he hadn't experienced in years. "I've never woken up to such a lovely breakfast," he replied, slipping out of bed and making his way to the kitchen. Margaret beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "Maybe life gives us second chances like this, when we least expect it." As he took a seat at the small kitchen table, Ethan found himself captivated by her presence. He had never seen her quite like this before, her hair loosely pinned back, a simple yet elegant blouse paired with soft, flowing pants that accentuated her graceful figure. It was as if the morning light had breathed new life into her, and he couldn't help but admire the woman before him. "Do you remember the last time we had breakfast like this?" she asked, pouring tea into his cup. Ethan chuckled softly, recalling a time long past. "It feels like a lifetime ago. I think we were both so caught up in our own worlds then." Margaret nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. "Sometimes, I look in the mirror and wonder who I've become. But moments like this remind me of who I really am." The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Ethan met her gaze, feeling a connection that transcended the years. "You're still that vibrant woman," he said earnestly. "You have a light in your eyes that hasn't dimmed." Margaret's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked down, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. "Thank you, Ethan. That means more than you know." They spent the morning reminiscing, flipping through old photo albums filled with memories of laughter and joy. Margaret shared stories of her youth, recalling the dances she attended, the elegant dresses she wore, and the way everyone would stop to watch her twirl on the dance floor. "I used to feel so alive back then," she said wistfully. Ethan traced a finger over a photograph of her from those days, her youthful smile radiant. "Your eyes were so full of life," he remarked. "They still are. That spark is still there, just a little dusty." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of rediscovering the woman she had once been. "I've forgotten how to see that part of myself," she admitted, her voice trembling. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We can dust it off together." Later that afternoon, they decided to visit the local farmers' market. As they walked side by side, Ethan carried the bags while Margaret strolled behind him, a newfound spring in her step. The vendors greeted them with friendly smiles, and whispers followed in their wake. "Is that her grandson?" one woman murmured, while another shook her head, dismissing the idea. But neither of them cared what others thought. When Ethan took Margaret's hand, there was no hesitation, no embarrassment, just a shared understanding of their companionship. Margaret felt youthful again, invigorated by the simple act of being seen. At one stall, she paused, captivated by a display of vintage perfumes. Picking up a bottle, she opened it and inhaled deeply. "This was my favorite scent when I was younger," she said, a smile breaking across her face. Ethan didn't hesitate. he reached for his wallet. "I'm buying this for you. It suits you perfectly." Margaret's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, you don't have to do that." "I want to," he insisted, his tone firm yet gentle. With a shy smile, she accepted the gift, spritzing a bit on her wrist and closing her eyes as the familiar scent enveloped her. For a moment, she was transported back to her youth, the memories flooding back like a warm embrace. Ethan watched her, admiration shining in his eyes. As they returned home, the rain began to fall softly, creating a soothing rhythm against the windows. Ethan lit the fireplace, the flames flickering to life, casting a warm glow throughout the room. Meanwhile, Margaret disappeared into her bedroom, emerging moments later in a silk robe she hadn't worn in years. She stood before the mirror, examining herself, the wrinkles, the sagging shoulders, but in Ethan's eyes, she saw something different. She saw a woman who still had stories to tell, a heart that still beat with passion. With a deep breath, she tied the robe sash and stepped into the living room, where Ethan was waiting. The moment he saw her, his expression softened, and he felt a rush of warmth. "Wow," he breathed, taking in her elegance. Margaret stood at the threshold, feeling a mix of vulnerability and strength. She was ready to embrace whatever came next. Margaret's breath caught in her throat as she felt Ethan's gaze linger on her. His eyes held admiration and respect, and she couldn't help but smile. "You're so beautiful." "No one has looked at me like that in years," she said softly. "How could I not look at someone like you?" he replied, his voice warm and sincere. This exchange deepened the connection between them, transforming their shared solitude into something more intimate. Ethan reached out his hand, and without hesitation, Margaret took it. They settled into the couch together, the crackling of the fireplace providing a comforting backdrop to their burgeoning emotions. "This night feels different," she said, glancing at him with a mix of vulnerability and hope. "Yes," Ethan agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because we're not alone anymore." They didn't speak much that evening, instead, they shared the silence, letting it envelop them like a soft blanket. As Ethan gently brushed his fingers through Margaret's hair, she closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "I never thought I would let anyone get this close to me again," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you've ignited something inside me." Ethan smiled softly, feeling that spark still flickering between them. Margaret opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for making me feel like a woman again." "I only spoke the truth," he replied, his sincerity evident. Leaning her head against his chest, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. "Every moment with you feels like a chance to reclaim lost time." When morning arrived, Margaret prepared breakfast alone, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Ethan walked into the kitchen to find a spread of warm, buttery croissants and a vibrant fruit salad waiting for him. "Aren't you working today?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly in concern. "I'm here for you," he said, his tone resolute. "I don't want to leave." Margaret paused, her heart swelling. "No one has thought of me like this in years." "I could get used to this," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "If you'd like, I can come by every day," Ethan offered, his eyes searching hers. "Would you really?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "I would love that." As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. They cooked together, watched classic films, and shared stories late into the night. One evening, Ethan surprised her with a pair of delicate bracelets. "Whenever you look at these, remember me," he said, his voice soft as he placed them on her wrist. "I could never forget you, Ethan," Margaret replied, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. In that moment, their relationship transcended loneliness. It became a connection, a love that defied age and societal norms. Margaret had begun to live again, while Ethan found the love he had long sought in the most unexpected place. Yet, as with every beautiful story, shadows loomed on the horizon. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret opened her window to find the leaves turning golden, signaling the change of seasons. Autumn was not just a shift in weather, it marked a transition in her life. She was no longer alone, Ethan was there. Days turned into weeks, and their relationship became the subject of whispers among neighbors. "What is she doing with someone so much younger?" they would murmur. "What does she see in him?" Margaret, who had always walked with her head held high, felt the sting of their words. The scrutiny was like a gentle scratching at the soft wounds in her heart. Ethan noticed her discomfort. "If you want, we can move somewhere else," he suggested one evening, concern etched on his face. Margaret shook her head. "I don't want to run away. This is my life. I'm happy when I'm with you, but sometimes it just gets exhausting." Ethan wrapped his arms around her tightly. "I'm here, no matter what." One morning, a knock at the door shattered their peaceful routine. It was Margaret's son, David, whom she hadn't seen in years. He had returned unexpectedly from abroad, and as he stepped inside, he looked at her with a mix of surprise and confusion. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Who is this?" Ethan stood up, his expression a mix of defiance and concern. "Hello, I'm Ethan. Is this Margaret's home?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. David, Margaret's son, glared at him, disbelief etched across his face. "What are you doing with my mother?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "When I was your age, I was just starting my life, not getting involved with someone decades older." Margaret rose from her chair, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "David, please," she implored, her voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what the neighbors are saying about us? You've embarrassed yourself and me." The weight of her son's words felt like daggers piercing her heart. Ethan remained silent, but his eyes burned with anger. "Mom, you've lived your life the way everyone expected you to," David continued, his voice rising. "You married Dad, raised us, but no one ever loved you like a woman deserves to be loved." "Ethan sees me for who I am, wrinkles and all," Margaret replied, her voice gaining strength. "Why can't you accept that?" David hesitated, but his pride took over. "You should be alone now. This kid doesn't love you, he's just taking advantage of your loneliness." Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. "I have never harmed Margaret. I love her, no matter what her age is. And that love doesn't require your approval." David narrowed his eyes, a challenge in his gaze. "Can you prove that?" The following day, Margaret was quiet, withdrawn. It was as if she had retreated into her shell, a freedom she hadn't felt in years suddenly stripped away. Ethan tried to reach out to her. "When we're together, everything is beautiful. Are you scared now, or are you regretting what we had?" Margaret turned away, her heart heavy. "Everything we shared was real, but maybe our time has run out." "No," Ethan insisted. "It's not time, it's the pressure from others that they can't accept. We chose each other. We can't just walk away from this." But Margaret remained silent, and that night, Ethan left quietly, the weight of their unspoken words hanging in the air. Days turned into a blur. Margaret brewed her tea alone, sitting by the window, gazing out at the street where Ethan used to walk. The neighborhood felt eerily quiet, but inside her, a storm raged. She refused to believe it was over. Finally, she made a decision. She donned her favorite dress, styled her hair, and set out for the neighborhood where Ethan lived. With the help of an old friend, she found him. She knocked on the door, her heart racing. When Ethan opened it, his eyes were misty with emotion. Margaret, he breathed, a smile breaking through his worry. I'm sorry, Ethan. I thought I could protect myself by running away, but I can't stand being without you, she confessed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan pulled her into his arms. I waited for you every day, and I was never angry. Because I know you love me too. They decided to move to a different city, seeking a fresh start. They rented a small house by the ocean, where the waves sang a soothing lullaby. At night, they lay under the stars, sharing dreams and laughter. During the day, they strolled through local markets, hand in hand, savoring the simple joys of life together. Margaret began to smile again, her age losing its significance. Ethan learned what it meant to truly love a woman. One day, as they walked along the beach, Margaret paused. You know, she said softly, I spent so many years trying to please everyone else, but with you, I've found myself. I've become a woman in love. Ethan smiled back, his heart full. You taught me how to love life. Years later, people still whispered about the young courier and the older woman. Did they truly love each other? Only the ocean knew the answer, along with the two hearts that beat within their little home. Love doesn't ask for age. Love doesn't wait for time. Love doesn't judge. Their story told just that, and the last words Margaret wrote in her journal were, I was waiting for a courier that day, but fate knocked on my door. Subscribe to the channel,